there are many accounts of other people that are considered, you know, by different kinds of people to be historical.
Right.
And
Muhammad.
Right.
He was an historical person, right?
Right.
Well, I think if anybody says, oh no, Muhammad was a myth, they're out to lunch. The overwhelming historical evidence is Muhammad was a real person who really lived. No question in my mind.
Right, but my question was with people like this or other historical figures that, you know, might not, I wouldn't call them historical figures, but other people that, you know, might say that, you know, there was this other person that also died and that also resurrected 3 days ago. My question is, can you apply Thomas Aquinas' way of interpreting to say that that was a prefiguration of Jesus Christ?
No, I wouldn't do that. Instead, if someone comes to me and says, Cliff, somebody rose from the dead, wow, I want to study it. I want to find out, does the evidence point that way?
Okay.
You know what one of my biggest challenges is? I live in a culture filled with a lot of people who think Elvis rose from the dead and Jesus didn't. I got my work cut out for me, man. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah.
There is no evidence that Elvis Presley rose from the dead. There's a truckload of evidence that Jesus Christ did rise from the dead. That's why I do not believe that Elvis rose from the dead, and I do believe that Jesus did rise from the dead.
Okay.
And I do not believe that Osiris rose from the dead. Why? Because it's in a mythological form. And you've got this guy, which is the only account that I know of that predates Christ that is claiming resurrection. It's the Egyptian belief that Osiris, who was chopped into 14 pieces, and then his sister Isis goes looking for those 14 pieces, finds 13 of them. One part she doesn't find. You'll never guess what that part was. She puts those pieces back together again, and then he resurrects to live in the underworld. And then people try and really say to me, you see, that's where the resurrection of Christ comes from. You gotta be kidding me.
No, yeah.
It's totally different, radically different. And that's the only account of a resurrection that predates Christ. So, I mean, when people say to me, oh, you know, Christianity is really based on all these borrowing from these other religions and resurrection myths or whatever,
yeah.
Baloney. The account of the Gospels is the dead Jesus of Nazareth, who really ate, slept, wept, taught, died. He really rose from the dead. This is an historical claim. That is radically different from every other religion.
One more thing. A big question that always comes up is why do people that not necessarily, someone earlier was talking about it, somebody that lived in an island that had no contact to Jesus Christ, or somebody that did have contact, but
right.
you know, grew up in another religion and didn't have the opportunity.
Yes.
I've read also from Benedict Spinoza. He writes that Jeremiah and Moses wrote about a time where God would directly write his law in people's hearts.
You bet.
And therefore...
That's right. That's what I've been arguing out here.
Right. And I was just wanted to check with you what you thought of it. Like, if you think that just because somebody doesn't believe in Jesus Christ the way we do, that doesn't mean necessarily that they're disconnected to God.
Right.
Okay.
That's exactly right. Okay, you make a great point. That's this whole objective moral argument that I've been going over and over and over again for the past 5 days, right? Every human being, every atheist, every agnostic, every Buddhist, Hindu, Jew, Muslim, every person on the face of the planet has a moral indicator inside called a conscience that ties them into an objective moral law. And the only way there can be an objective moral law is if there is some type of God to create and define it. That's exactly my point. Okay, now the second issue that you raised, it's a very thoughtful issue, is, okay, fine, but how is God going to judge those people who've never heard about Christ? I do not know specifically, because Jesus never specifically addressed the question. But he makes 5 points that apply to your excellent question. First point, we do know that God's nature is just, which means nobody's getting ripped off. Secondly, we do know that nobody spends eternity separate from God because they make a mistake or because of lack of information. The only reason people spend eternity separate from God, that's hell, is because they choose to live their life separate from God. And God's not going to haul them into heaven against their will. So in other words, I think I know what the theme song of hell will be. I did it my way. And God will say, fine, you can do it your way. I'm not going to interfere. We also know from the New Testament, Hebrews chapter 11, that there are going to be a truckload of people in heaven who never heard about Jesus. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Rahab, a Gentile prostitute, obviously never heard about Jesus. They were born hundreds of years before him. But in humility, they put their faith in God. And so there are going to be a lot of people from India and Africa and North America and South America and China who are going to be in heaven who never heard about Christ, but in humility, they put their faith in God to the best of their ability. Now, the only reason they're going to be in heaven is not because they lived a good life. Because none of us live a good life that's good enough for God. They're going to be in heaven because God loves them, applies the death of his son to their life, and they'll be in heaven. It's the only reason Abraham and Moses are going to be in heaven. Moses was a murderer, and Abraham was a dude with a major problem. My wife. Oh no, sure, she's my sister. You can go ahead and have her. It's part of your harem. I mean, that was one messed up dude. All right? What a wimp, right? Okay, so the only reason Abraham's going to be in heaven is because he put his faith in God, and God applies the death of his son, Christ, to his life, and he's forgiven. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, it does. Very, very last. I've always found a problem with heaven, with the concept of heaven and hell.
Yep.
Because they seem to be infinite states that grant our heaven is being regarded as a reward, and heaven and hell as a punishment. But they're infinite punishments or infinite rewards, and it seems like we're being granted this reward or punishment based on finite actions.
Good.
And isn't that unfair?
Good. I like your thinking. Great issue. Okay. This gentleman and I are in kindergarten. We're in the sandbox. All of a sudden, I haul back and slap him. Whoa. We get into it. Teacher comes out. Cliff, why did you slap him? Well, because he stole my whatever. Fine, Cliff. Come with me. You have a detention. No more playing in recess. Inside. Shoot. All right. Walking inside, I haul back and slap the teacher. Whoa. All of a sudden, I'm in the principal's office. And the principal is looking at me like, All of a sudden, I haul back and slap the principal. Now I'm just digging my hole really deep. The penalty starts to increase from slapping my classmate in the sandbox to slapping the teacher to slapping the principal. So the principal calls in the police. Police officer comes in, and little dude Cliff walks up to police officer. Slap! Now Cliff is really in a lot of trouble. He's just accosted a police officer. Now I'm hauled down to the police department. And there's the chief of police. And here comes Cliff, walking up to the chief of police. Hauls back, wham! Now Cliff is really, really getting into big trouble here, and the penalty is increasing. So now adolescent Cliff is hauled into court, and I walk up to the judge. Here comes Cliff, pop to the judge. Now Cliff is on his way to prison. Why? What's the difference between me hitting him, me hitting the teacher, me hitting the principal, me hitting the police officer, me hitting the chief of police, me hitting the judge? It's simply an issue of authority. The teacher has more authority than my buddy in the sandbox. The principal has more authority than the teacher. The police has more authority than the principal. And the chief of police has more authority than the police officer, and the judge has more authority than the chief of police. Now, I have the attitude of slapping God in the face. Not a wise move, Cliff. The penalty of hell is so big because of God's authority, who God is. And there are different penalties for defying and rebelling and disregarding authority. So, no, I don't get into jail because I slapped my playmate in the sandbox. For slapping the judge, I will go to jail.